on the flight back, I started going through my notes and organizing them, and when I got home, I started doing more research on it, and from there, I divided everything into 8 different sections. So this is going to be an 8-week series. And when I was finished that, I decided, well, maybe I'll help Jody out a little more and I'll do a PowerPoint. So that's what I was working on, putting the pictures on the PowerPoint. And then about 3 weeks ago, I just got home from work and I was starting supper, and then Jody walked through the door and he said, how would you like to be the one to teach the series on Israel? And my first thought was like, yikes. Because people automatically think that you can teach adults because you teach little kids, but I'm used to little 5-year-olds. But anyway, here I am. I'll start. Yep.
We can act like we're fun.
Yeah. Okay, so this is an 8-week series, and we're going to do our best to bring Israel to you. We have lots of pictures that we took, and this first session that we're doing today doesn't have a lot of our pictures because it's about the history of Israel, and so I had to find a lot of online pictures. But the weeks after that, we'll have lots of pictures that we have taken. And each week, we would like to have a gift for you, and this week it is that little notebook so you can take notes, and it's a little pen that has Israel and the title of the series. It's called The Birthplace of Our Christian Heritage. And after that, we're going to try to provide some food that grows in Israel. That's what Wayne and I are working on now, and some of it's difficult because there's a lot of boycotts on their products from Jewish people. But anyway, we're working on that, and we do have some at the house, and hopefully other food products will come. But anyway, I'll get started on this. This is a picture that our photographer took. That's the current picture of Jerusalem. That's what Jerusalem looks like now. And in the center, that's considered the spiritual center of the earth, right there, in the center of Jerusalem. There's our title, Israel, the Birthplace of Our Christian Heritage. And I provided the world map, and I tried to draw a circle around Israel. But Israel is so tiny that I couldn't. You see that oval there? Israel is smaller than that. It's in the middle of it. That's how small Israel is. And you can see different countries around there. You can see how they're surrounded by hostile nations, people that are against them. And they're trying to destroy Israel. And I actually heard on the news once that the president of Iran said that he wants to wipe Israel off the map. And then I was doing some research on that, and what I read was the media misquoted him. That's not what he said. He didn't say he wanted to wipe Israel off the map. He said he wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And if you look around there, like, naturally speaking, that should be pretty easy. But God has big plans for Israel.
Amen.
So anyway, we know that's not going to happen, and little does he know he's fighting against the God that created the whole universe. And he's fighting against God's promises.
That's right.
And another thing, I remember about a month ago when Jody was preaching, we had to turn to the book of Genesis, and I remember I looked down, and the footnotes on the bottom, it said that the Hebrew meaning for Israel is God fights. So I thought of that different times. God fights. The Hebrew meaning for Israel. And so anyway, they're always under an attack. And they fire rockets at it continuously. But Israel has an iron dome that they use to protect their nation. And what it does is it can detect the rockets that are coming to Israel, and it shoots them down, destroys them before it hits land. And it can detect exactly where it's going to land. So if the rocket is going to hit the land where it's populated, then it's destroyed within seconds. And online, there's this artist in Israel. He takes the metal from those rockets, and he makes things out of it. And I bought a necklace from him. He tries to make roses out of it. On the back it says rockets into roses. And in the Bible it says that The swords will be turned into the plows, or the blades of a plow, and the spears will be pounded down and made into pruning hooks. So that's where he started his company.
Mhm.
And they use the money, like the money they got from this necklace and other things, they use that to build bomb shelters in Israel, because when a rocket's coming, they have like 15 seconds to find shelter. So they're building more bombs in the areas that are usually targeted. So, this one. Okay, here's our series. Part 2, which will be not next Sunday, but the Sunday after. We're taking a break because of Thanksgiving. It'll be Jesus in the Holy Land. We have lots of pictures of the places where he taught and preached and healed people. Part 3, it'll be a session on Jerusalem. Part 4, miracles since Israel became a nation. And Part 5 is a continuation of that. Because while we were there, we saw how the land is changing. And anyway, it's miracles about the language returning. There's lots of things. So we're going to talk about that in Part 6. The miracle of the Dead Sea and the Dead Sea Scrolls. In Part 7, it's blessed to become a blessing. Because the Jewish people, they are to be a blessing to us. They are a light to the nations. So we're going to learn about that there. And then the last part, it'll be the importance of praying for Israel. And so today, it's the first part. It began with a promise. Okay, that's a picture that we took. We took that just because of the flag, and in the background you can see the Dead Sea. That's a current picture. And for today's title, Israel, it began with a promise. Israel's roots can be traced back to a promise that God made to Abraham. And that promise was made about 4,100 years ago. There's an online picture.
The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you."
So there's that important promise, the promise that God is still remembering today. And in Psalm 105, it reminds us that God will remember this promise forever. I guess must not work for that one. So I'll read it. He remembers his covenant forever, the promise he made for 1,000 generations, the covenant he made with Abraham, the oath he swore to Isaac. He confirmed it to Jacob as a decree, to Israel as an everlasting covenant. To you I will give the land of Canaan, to the portion you will inherit. And in Genesis 15:18,
Your descendants I give this land from the one.
guess you can't make that up either. So anyway, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River. That's God's promise. And if you look on the left, that's Israel today, that tiny nation. But God promised that it would be bigger. And the one on the right, that's the size that Israel will be someday, because God promised that. So sometimes I look at that and I think how much those countries around are fighting for that land, but little do they know Israel's supposed to be bigger. So yeah, it's almost like they should be happy that they have their other land. Yep. Land flowing with milk and honey. God said that this great nation would occupy a land that is flowing with milk and honey. So the audio doesn't work, right? I can just barely hear it. Okay, I'll read it. Ezekiel 20, verse 5 to 6. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I chose Israel, I swore with uplifted hand to the descendants of Jacob and revealed myself to them in Egypt. With uplifted hand, I said to them, I am the Lord your God. On that day, I swore to them that I would bring them out of Egypt into the land I had searched out for them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most beautiful of all lands. And according to the Jewish people, the milk refers to goat's milk. That's what our Jewish tour guide told us. And here are some goats. They're ibex goats, and they just run wild. There's a few verses in the Old Testament that mentions these wild goats. Daniel took that video there. So Israel has lots of goats. And the Jewish people claim that the honey refers to the honey that flows from dates and figs. That's what our tour guide told us. But through excavations, there have been more than 30 beehives found that dated between the 9th and 10th century BC. So the milk and honey indicates that the promised land meant abundance and wealth for the Jewish people. And that's a picture there that we took. It's a mustard plant. They just grow wild in Israel. Okay, and this brings us to the offspring. God made a promise to Abraham and his wife Sarah that they would have children, but they didn't have children, so it was Sarah's idea for her husband to have a child through Hagar. So anyway, they just kind of took things into their own hands, and he did have a child through Hagar, but that was not God's plan. And then later, Abraham and Sarah did have a child, and that was Isaac. So when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, Sarah became pregnant, and they had a son named Isaac. And God made it clear in Genesis 17, verse 18 and 19, that he would establish his covenant with Isaac. Even though it was not God's plan for Abraham to have an offspring through Hagar, he still promised to bless Ishmael's descendants. And this brings us to the conflict between the two brothers. Today, the descendants of Ishmael are citizens of the wealthiest nations of the world. Some of the wealthiest nations. They have a tremendous amount of oil-rich land, and they are great in number. The Arabic people descended from Ishmael, and Islam originated from Ishmael. And that hostility and violence in Israel that has lasted throughout the centuries and is still currently going on stems from those two brothers, Ishmael and Isaac. Muslims identify with Abraham through Hagar and Ishmael, but Jews and Christians, they identify with Abraham through Sarah and Isaac. So both Christians and Muslims, they both claim to be heirs of Abraham, but God makes it clear in Genesis 17:21 that the covenant will be established through Isaac. And then Jesus can be traced back through the line of Abraham's son. And there's a family tree there. Abraham, Sarah goes right down to David, and you skip a few, and Jesus. And you can see Hagar's on the left there. So then we'll fast forward through history. Years later, after Moses led the Jews to the Promised Land, King David built Jerusalem, which is the capital of Israel, and his son, King Solomon, he built the first temple on the Temple Mount. And that temple was destroyed, and then the second temple was built. And then later, that was expanded by King Herod, a Roman king. And when you see on the news, you see people at the Wailing Wall in that courtyard. That was built by King Herod. He wanted the temple area bigger. And then we'll fast forward a little bit more, 70 AD. Then, in 70 AD, the Roman army captured the city of Jerusalem, and they destroyed it, along with that second temple. and the Jews fled as refugees to various lands around the world, just like Jesus had prophesied would happen. So for almost 2,000 years after that, the Jews no longer had authority in the promised land that God gave them. They settled to various places around the world while they still maintained their Jewish identity. Their land that God promised Abraham and his descendants was then ruled and occupied by various empires. And while we were in this building right outside the Wailing Wall, they had this timeline of all the people that used to occupy Jerusalem. So I just used my phone and took a video of it. We'll see if it works here. The dates are on the bottom, but it's hard to see them. Yeah, I did, didn't I? You trying to copy it down?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'll get your notes later.
Okay. So here we are today. The state of Israel started in 1948. That's where we are today. So Israel today, 2,000 years later, the Jewish people survived against all odds. God is making them into a great nation, and he continues to bless them as Jews from around the world are returning to the promised land. So that's what's happening today, and that's what we saw when we were in Israel. And I've thought of that different times, like 2,000 years, that's a long, long time to remember.
Mm-hmm.
That promise that God made that they're going to have the promised land. And I thought of it this way. I was thinking, like, maybe there's a grandfather who has his grandson on his lap and saying, you know, I've been praying that we would go back to Israel. That's our land. I was praying, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen in my generation. Then he tells his grandson, well, maybe it'll be you. Maybe you'll be in the promised land. And I thought, well, he'll grow up and he'll tell his kids, you know, maybe we'll go to the promised land. And they keep praying for it. And they believe it because I know God spoke it. It's true. It's going to happen. But then generations come, generations go, and it didn't happen. But the amazing thing is, it's happening today during our generation.
Amen.
See, there's a record number of Jews are returning to Israel, and we'll talk about that with the miracles that we're going to talk about in one of the other weeks. And there's Jews from around the world that are coming, like all over the world. And I remember probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we went on a cruise to the Caribbean like we often do, and we stopped at an island and did a tour, and I don't remember the exact island, maybe Wayne knows, but he was giving us a tour, and there was this building with the Star of David on the door, and the tour guide said, like, that's a Jewish synagogue, but there's no Jews here anymore. I don't know, they're all gone. And like, Wayne and I know exactly where they're going. Where they went.
Right.
Do you remember what island that was, Wayne? Oh, was it Aruba? Okay. Yep. And when the Jews come back to Israel, the first thing they like to do is kiss the ground. So that's what he's doing there. And they have volunteers that come and greet them, and they have a big celebration. And they also have instant citizenship. They don't have to wait for a year or two once they get to Israel. Because that's their land. Okay, and then that's going to lead us to a video that we ordered from Israel. This video is about the people that came back to the promised land, the people that are there today, and they're working the land, and miracles are happening on the land. Like when the Jewish people left, which we'll talk about another week, the land became desolate, became a desert, nothing was growing. But now once they step foot on the land, it's flourishing, things are growing. So in this video, you're gonna see current pictures of Israel, and you'll meet some of the people that live there now. So is that going to start now? There we go.
beauty of this land and its ancient history means many things to many people. But for me, it means one thing: life. I will tell you the story of where that life began. There is a mountain in the heart of my country, a mountain very special to me. This mountain is Elon Moreh, the place written in the book of Genesis, where God told Abraham to stop and look out over the land. I am now a great-grandfather, and from time to time, I come here with my family. It was here that God first promised my people that He would care for us in this land. That is why this mountain is special for me and my family. We believe in God and hold strong to His promises.
For nearly 2 millennia, the promised land of the Bible was a barren wasteland. Its archaeological ruins a reminder of its glorious history. Its people scattered throughout the 4 corners of the world. But towards the end of the 19th century, things began to change. A new wind began to breathe through this land. There is a prophecy in the Bible about God returning a valley of dry bones to life. Many believe this prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes. Is experiencing a dramatic renaissance never before seen in human history. In a land that was barren for nearly 2,000 years, life is bursting forth. Acres of vineyards and olive groves are transforming the Rocky Mountains. From every nation on earth, Christian tourists are coming here by the millions, fulfilling their dreams of walking in the very places where their Savior walked. And most miraculously of all, Israel is once again becoming the home of the once scattered Jewish people. Over the last century, they have returned here by the millions, from the north, south, east, and west. We are living in the times spoken about long ago, the time that this nation would be reborn. Journey with us now to the land of Israel and meet the people who call this place home. High in the Golan Heights, a cattle drive is underway, steered by a team of Israeli cowboys. Israel's remote northernmost region offers the most fertile soil in the country, ideal for farming and raising cattle. Young men come here with dreams of carving out a life for themselves through working the land. Men like Jonathan Rosenberg.
My connection to the land, for me as a Jewish person, it's sort of a homing beacon. First time I came out here, all the things that I learned in the Torah, it all clicked together. I came to Israel my first time when I was 19 to go find myself per se and also find out, all about the land. Always wanting to go to the army, but wanted my mom's grace to go. Until 25, I was back and forth to Israel, America, until my mom gave the okay to go. I came out at 26, joined up. A real big thing that got me in defending the Jewish nation was We have less people than most armies, but because of people's love for this nation, they fight with such more passion. We're not going out on the offensive to go and attack other people. If we get attacked, we're going out. So I always wanted to be part of that because, it's defending the place I love, the people I love. So now I feel that I've done my portion in defending this generation, and my kids will also be the defenders in the next generation, God willing. I think I was able to be part of it and continue to be part of it. So now that I've gotten out of the IDF, my plan is to bring cattle from the States, build up a farm, get married out here so that my family can continue and help out this nation. In the long shot, build a community and have even more families that have the same dreams or the same calling from God. There's definitely something happening. Everybody's feeling it, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in the States. People my age, the younger kids, especially a lot of kids in college are getting a lot of, hate. There's a lot of anti-Israel in it. It's definitely breeding a new love and a new calling for people to come to Israel. There's been an abundance of people from places where they felt comfortable to come out to start a new life out here. There's something out there. There's something in the air that's changed. It's definitely having a big effect on kids coming and wanting to join the IDF or coming to live in Israel itself. And, get her done. Israel is to me my everything, my dream, my hope, my future, my family's future. God willing, all that will come true the way it should be and the way it will be. I am Jonathan Rosenberg, and I am Israel.
In the middle of this nation lie the regions of Judea and Samaria. It is called by many the biblical heartland of Israel. It was here that 85% of the Bible's events took place. Today, after centuries of exile, Jewish families are returning to these regions, re-establishing their roots in the land of their fathers. One of these pioneers is Batya Sela.
I know I got an A in the final test in Bible, but really I never started studying until I moved here. A few years ago I came over to this area, to Itamar, to visit a friend of mine that worked in an organic farm in the middle of nowhere. I remember I got off the car and it was dark and I went to sleep and I woke up in the morning and I looked around me. Everything seemed so beautiful and so Genesis and as if no one touched it before. I wasn't used to it from coming from the city. I suddenly realized that this is where my ancestors came from. I live here, I love it. I feel I found my place. Most of my job is, I'm a mother of 2 boys, I'm a wife to Yaakov, perfect Yaakov. And actually my son has a birthday today, he's 3, my youngest. When I look at my son walking around, going to my neighbor's goats, going to the donkey, feeding them, picking the eggs, I'm almost jealous with him for the calm and special life that I feel I'm giving them, because it's something that I never had. One of the things I love the most is to tell my boys, tell them stories. We just open the Bible and we read outside. But it's so easy because I can drive 5 minutes and look down and tell my son, look, you see down there? You see this building? This is Joseph's tomb. You see, this is what we read last Sabbath. We read about Abraham coming into the land, so we stood here on the mountain of Elon Moreh. And this is what he saw. And this is where he raised his family and he walked around and built his altar. We can just look around and place the stories exactly where it happened because it's just so close. Our goal together, Gidon and mine, is to remember the whole Bible and all the stories in the Bible by heart. But he's only 5.5, so we still have time for that. My goal for them really, I want them to be as happy as possible, but I want them to handle their fears and to build houses here. I want them to be able to sit on the porch at the end of the day, drinking their coffee and living peacefully, not being afraid of anyone coming to to kill them or I just want them to stay safe. I think that's all that I can wish for. I've been given this beautiful gift. And they're a gift that I have, I don't even know for how long. And I just like to watch them grow. But what I would love, and I'm praying for getting from them, is for them to be able to be with a clear heart and to be right, even if people on the outside are not coming with them, even if it's scary. I think of Abraham, that the whole world was on one side. He was the only one that thought that there is one God and not 2,000. And he stood for what he believed in. With my boys right now, I think this is the most important thing, is for him to be able to look at the mirror at the end of the day and to know that he is doing what he thinks is right. This is my goal for him. And to be happy, of course. To me, Israel is family more than anything else. It's family, it's home. I am Bat Yasela, and I am Israel.
West of Judea and Samaria lie the warm coastlands of Israel. The cities that run along the Mediterranean Sea are centers of global business, advanced technology, world-class cuisine, and art. This region is also home to one of the great contemporary painters of Israel, Alex Levine.
כשהייתי בן 6, אז טיילנו עם אמא שלי באוקראינה, בקייב, וביקשתי לאמא שלי שהיא תיכנס והיא הרימה אותי, והסתכלתי בתוך החלון, וראיתי שהילדים יושבים ומציירים, ואמרתי שאני גם רוצה. פשוט משהו משך אותי, פשוט להיכנס לשם ולהתחיל לצייר. והתחלתי לצייר, וכל כך אהבתי את זה, שנראה לי בגיל 6, אפילו בגיל 7 כבר הבנתי שאני אהיה צייר. אני אלכס לוין, ואני צייר. אז עלינו לארץ בשנות 1990 עם כל המשפחה שלי. אז הגעתי לארץ בשנת 90 בלי שום ידע על ישראל. ברגע שראיתי את הארץ, התאהבתי מהרגע הראשון. בשבילי ארץ ישראל זה מקום קדוש, זה מקום יפה, זה מקום איפה אני רוצה לגור, לגדל ילדים שלי. אני חושב שאין מקום בעולם איפה ליהודי לגור הכי טוב.
From Paris to Vienna, Sydney to New York City, Alex's work has been celebrated around the world. Christian churches and Jewish synagogues hang his paintings on their walls to communicate the tangible reality of God's beautiful land.
אין דבר יותר יפה מאשר מקצוע שלך נותן לך תענוג כל כך גדול. אני קם בבוקר, הדבר היחידי שאני רוצה לעשות זה לרוץ ולצייר. ואני חושב שזה כיף הכי גדול. ברגע שראיתי ירושלים פעם ראשונה, הסתכלתי ולא האמנתי שמקום כזה קיים, מקום כל כך יפה, כל כך מושלם. הייתי פשוט מרותק מהיופי, ואמרתי שזאת שליחות שלי להיות צייר ולקחת ירושלים ולשים אותו בראש שמחתי. כי בארץ כל כנסייה, כל בית כנסת, בונים על מקום שיש שם סיפור. אז אני רוצה להזמין לארץ לא רק יהודים, אלא נוצרים. פשוט מקום שרוצה לחבק את כל האנשים בכל העולם. אני מצייר ירושלים לא רק איך הוא נראה באמת, אלא איך אני רואה אותו, איך אני מרגיש אותו. אני רוצה שאנשים ירגישו שירושלים זה מקום קדוש לכולם. I am Alex Levine and I am Israel.
In all of the world, there is but one city where the God of the Bible promised his eyes and his heart will always be Jerusalem. Established by King David as Israel's eternal capital and revered throughout history as the spiritual heart of the world, Jerusalem has been the focus of more conflict and more joy than any other city in history. Since 1967, Jewish men and women have been allowed to freely live and work in the old city of their fathers. One of these women is Daniela Avraham.
I love working as a tour guide, especially here in Jerusalem, but in general all over Israel. I think that Jerusalem is so welcoming and so inviting and just wants everyone to come and see and connect and feel that they're a part of it as well.
Beneath the busy streets, a treasure trove of discoveries laid quietly for centuries. But today, archaeologists are uncovering the remains of the original city that was ancient Jerusalem, the city of David. The palace where David played his harp and wrote his songs. The homes where families lived during the times of the kings. The road on which Jesus walked on his way to the temple.
I love the feeling, I love the experience of bringing people around the land of Israel and to take them around and to show them this is where this happened and this is where that happened, and to have it come to life in front of your very eyes. And it does something. Everyone is moved in some way. My grandfather is a Holocaust survivor. He always used to tell the story about how during the war he spent his time during the Holocaust in different work camps together with his father. There's 2 special days of the year which you end up saying the same wish or the same prayer, the same hope and dream. At the end of the Passover Seder and at the end of the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim habnuya. Next year in a rebuilt Jerusalem. And my grandfather very much took this with him after the war. He found a safe place in the United States. He raised his family, he raised his son, my father. Finally, when I was 7 years old, we made Aliyah. We moved from New York to live in Bet Shemesh, to live here in the land of Israel. And I've grown up here ever since. It made us grow up very differently. Whereas friends or relatives who lived abroad, they would grow up, let's say, as young girls, we would be talking about, hair and makeup and boys and shoes and clothing. And also here in Israel, we'd be walking around talking about hair and makeup and shoes and clothing, and we'd be talking more about the meaning of life and what it means to sacrifice and to give, and what does life mean, what does death mean, what are we willing to give our lives for. I think it gave us something a lot deeper and a lot more meaningful as part of our personalities. My hope for myself as a guide is that every person will take something from the tour home with them, some sort of realization, some sort of understanding. I think there's a reason that the Bible is still, #1 on the bestseller list, where everyone has something to learn from it, where the stories till this day are so relevant.
The original source of life for the city of Jerusalem was the Gihon Spring. It was next to this spring that the kings of Judah, such as Solomon, were anointed.
One of the most amazing things about this spring, being the source of life, it is also the first place that people would come when they would come visit the city of Jerusalem. You would immerse yourself in the water, what's called in Hebrew a mikveh. You would cleanse your soul, and only then, when you're clean and you're pure, are you ready to go visit the house of God. We have people from all over the world who come to visit, who come to see, who come to walk through the water, to touch, to feel, which brings to mind the prophecy, "Ki beiti beit tefillah yikareh lekol ha'amim." every stone has a story that it wants to tell. And Jerusalem wants to share that story. It wants to share that story with everyone. And everyone's welcome to come see, to come experience, and to come to connect to the stories, to the history, and to the land. I think I'm privileged to have grown up in a land where my grandfather, where his parents, where his forefathers only dreamed of living one day, of seeing built one day. This is home, and home is where you want to be. I am Daniela Abraham, and I am Israel.
In the times of the Bible, the promised land of milk and honey was Judea and Samaria, and the greatest symbol of this promise was the vineyard. For centuries, these regions were covered with vibrant, fertile grapevines. But after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Romans uprooted the vines and took them to Italy. For nearly 2,000 years, no vineyards existed on these mountains. But in the late 1990s, a few Jewish men came here with a goal to change that. Men like Yaakov Berg.
2,000 years ago, Israel known like the best wine country in the ancient world. The Roman Caesars, the Greeks, they brought their best wine, not from Italy, not from France, they brought it from here, from Israel. But for 2,000 years, the land was desert. It was impossible to grow something on those lands. And actually a lot of people tried, and they couldn't succeed. I was born in Russia, and I came to Israel when I was 3 years old. It was always my father's dream to touch the land, to grow something. You know, if you will ask my father, do you believe that your son will own a vineyard or a winery in Israel, back then in Russia? I mean, he will cry or laugh, but for sure he's not going to believe to that. I remember when we started to plant the vineyards, everything was rock. We need to drill into the rock in order to plant the vines. Everybody says, all the experts says, it's not going to work. Nothing will grow here. I don't think it's something that we can really understand. It's not that we changed the land, it's not that we brought a new soil or something like that. The land really came back to herself. It's like a dead man that came back to life.
The grapes Yaakov harvests to create his wines come from very special places. Elon Moreh, where God made his promise to Abraham. The Mount of Blessing, where Joshua said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant rested. The harvesters who pick these grapes are neither Israeli nor Jewish. Each year, hundreds of Christian volunteers from around the world travel to Israel to prune the vines and harvest the grapes of Jewish farmers in Judea and Samaria at no cost to the farmers.
The Bible promises three main things. First of all, that the Jewish people will come back to their homeland. Second, that the land will come back to us. And from the moment that we came back, it's become a heaven. The third thing that many people really forgot, they don't see it, but the Bible talks about it many times all over, that the entire world will come and will participate and will try to help. It's unbelievable. When I see it, I'm crying. The fact that we came back here, okay, but why somebody that lives so far away, thousands of kilometers from here, would like to know what's going on, would like to support, would like to be with us, that we will work together, you know. I think this is the biggest miracle that God gave us in, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years. Everybody that will come to Israel, touch the land and touch the people, it will change his life. Each one of us looking for something deeper than just a regular life. I believe and I feel and I know that in Israel, maybe it's the best place on earth to really feel it, to understand it. It's easier than all the rest of the world. To me, Israel is the best proof God exists and still acting in our world. I don't think you can find a better proof. I am Yaakov Berg, and I am Israel.
The Jewish people of Israel are growing in number and prospering like never before. But for all the good that is underway, Israel's allies on the world stage are shrinking in number. Many global leaders conclude that it is illegal for Jews to live in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the Golan Heights. If these lands are seized, many biblical and historical sites would be in jeopardy. Jews and Christians could be forbidden from setting foot in these places. In Hebrew, the burial cave of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the nearby tomb of Ruth, Shiloh, where the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant rested, where Hannah prayed for the child, and where Samuel grew as a prophet. Bethlehem, where King David was anointed, and where Emmanuel was born. Shechem, where Jacob lived with his family, where Joseph is buried, where Joshua declared that his house would serve the Lord, and where the Prince of Peace ministered to the woman at Jacob's well. Keirsey, where the great physician healed the man possessed by demons. The entire Golan Heights, Israel's buffer against northern attacks. Elon Moreh, the city of David, the Garden of Gethsemane, the Garden Tomb, the possible location where the Good Shepherd conquered the grave, the Mount of Olives, and the Temple Mount, the Mount of Prayer where Abraham, David, Solomon, Isaiah, Daniel, Ezra, Jesus, his apostles, and nearly every man and woman in the Bible came to worship God. If the nations of the world force the Jewish people to give up these lands, not only would these sites be at risk, but the country itself would shrink, leaving Israel even more vulnerable to outside missiles and foreign attacks. Every Friday night at sundown, Jewish families in this land gather together to honor the Sabbath. It is a time of rest, a day when the troubles of the world are forgotten. Blessings are spoken over the women and children. Prayers are prayed over the wine and the bread, symbols of the blessings of heaven. And a special meal is shared. Not since the days of the first century have so many Jewish families celebrated the Sabbath on the mountains and the valleys of this land.
I think we have a privilege of seeing with our own eyes the words of the book materializing and becoming a reality. In the history of mankind, there has never been a nation that has left its homeland and returned to its homeland. Not after 2,000 years.
In 1916, when my grandfather first moved to Israel, there were 60,000 Jews in Israel. Exactly 100 years later, there are over 6 million. Never in the world has there been a population explosion from 60,000 to 6 million as we've seen here in the land of Israel. It's unprecedented. Something is happening of historic proportions.
The world's actually constantly going through changes, but I think we're experiencing a hyper switch. Something's moving quicker.
We're living in times of prophecy. It says, I will bring you in from the four corners of the earth, and people will know that you are my people and that I am your God.
Here we see something so epic, so huge, so historic, promised in the Bible.
It's something that people couldn't have imagined 50 years ago.
God says in Jeremiah, no more am I going to be known as a daughter brought you out of the land of Egypt. I'm going to be known as a daughter brought you out of the land of the north and the other countries. And when he brought back the people from the land of the north, from Russia, he was saying something else. He's saying, no more am I going to be known as the God of history. I'm going to be known as the God of now. Open up your eyes, watch it happening. I'm on the move.
There are more Jews studying the Bible today than ever before in Israel's history. Every single promise is now coming to pass in our lifetime. And what that does is it inspires people to want to be a part of it. They feel a calling in their life to say, if God is with Israel, then either I'm moving to Israel or I'm standing with Israel. I'm helping Israel. I'm supporting Israel. I want to be a part of that.
Some truly feel I have the opportunity to be part of what God is doing in this land. And that doesn't only mean Jews, that means those that stand with God wherever they are.
When Isaiah said that all the nations will be streaming like water to the Temple Mount, he was talking about you. From Missouri, from Washington, from California, from Brazil, from Tunisia, from Indonesia. If you want to connect to the essence of the whole thing, the place where God chose to lay his divine presence, you got it. This is it.
With the dawn of each new day, life is returning to the land of the Bible. And around the world, millions of believers are feeling drawn to this place. Now is the time to chart your own journey, to discover for yourself the miracle of the land and the courageous hearts